I'd like to call the Governance Committee to order. First thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes of September 19th.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Ms. Stokes, second by Eric. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next thing on the agenda, administration recommends second reading of the following policies. GDO, which in my notes is evaluation of support staff. We talked about that last month.
Yep.
And ACAC, which is the Title IX policy.
Take a motion to bring to the full board.
Yep.
I will make that motion.
Both policies?
Both policies.
Okay, Ms. Stokes, second by Ms. Wiggin, right?
Yes,
All
Mrs.
right,
Wiggin.
Mrs. Wiggin. Any discussion?
Andy, you said you had an update on that ACAC.
I know there was a question at last month's meeting about why Texas, for example, had argued against it. What they're saying is that they feel it blocked it, actually, the Biden administration, these Title IX guidelines, because they feel like the federal government is overreaching. So right now it's in dispute. So Texas is feeling that the Title IX is really sex discrimination against women, and it does not go beyond that. And so they feel that the federal government is overreaching, not giving the state autonomy on that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Right.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next thing is administration recommends second reading deletion of 3 policies. AFD, which I don't have open at the moment, which is, I can open that, my computer's gonna work. Evaluation of support staff, which I think this is one is being replaced by the new policy. And there's ACAA-R, which is the old Title IX, and ACAB-R, which is also a Title IX, old Title IX. Is there a motion
I will make a
to
motion.
send to full board for second reading and deletion?
Yes.
Okay. Motion by Ms. Stokes, second by Ms. Wiggin, Mrs. Wiggin. Any discussion?
So question on that, and Andy, this would be for you as well. So because that's currently under review by the courts, should we be deleting these policies yet, or should we be waiting for the final rule?
That's a great question. So Texas is the only state that actually is not adhering to the Title IX policy. New Hampshire is. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Administration recommends first reading of a new policy, GDF, which is in your backup. That is the hiring of non-certified staff. Would you like to explain?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had a conversation with our full board chair, Mr. Downs, and he had made this recommendation when I went to the New Hampshire School Association website. They do have this policy. It's obviously a recommended policy, and I also spoke to several superintendents in the state, and this is exactly what they have as a policy. For any non-certified personnel, they do give the authority to the superintendent to hire, but any certified staff, instructional staff, would have to go to the school board. And so I'm proposing that in order to expedite the hiring process of, for example, a custodian or a cafeteria worker, that the board, this committee, give me authority to hire. Of course, it would still go to the full board, but they can start and not have to wait several weeks before starting. And again, this is non-certified staff, so this is not non-instructional staff.
Just this afternoon, I kind of browsed around in probably a dozen different school districts, and I found some that do it, some that don't, some that say with board consultation or something to that effect. So there are districts all over the place on this. Go ahead, Mr.
I think if your only thing is to get them in and hired, I would assume if they're in our school, they still have to have a background check and fingerprint. So that's gonna take as long as it would take for them to come before the board.
So they are able to start, so they fill out an application, as long as, they're truthful in the application, they can actually start while the fingerprinting is still being done. That's what the policy says currently in our book.
So that's more of a concern for me. I mean, I'm fine with you hiring. I mean, the bigger concern for me is making sure that whoever, I mean, people can lie on an application, we've had it here in the past. My concern is, even if the fingerprint takes longer, but the background, like whichever one, I feel like that to me is more important, because those people are maintenance, cafeteria, any non-certified, they're still with our students. So, I mean, getting them in quicker just means they're in there longer, and if they did lie on their application, that would be a concern. So my concern isn't that you wouldn't be able to hire them, my concern would be the background check and the fingerprint.
Correct me if I'm wrong too, if they rely on is there a legal ramification for somebody who is applying for a school district and lies and has a criminal record?
Third-degree felony.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion?
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Does this also apply to outside coaches? So we typically see the list of coaches coming in for the high school sports or other sports or whatever. So they're non-certified, it could be, parent volunteer type situation or outsider coming in to be a coach.
That is accurate, so this applies to everyone that it does not need to be credentialed under the state.
Kind of goes back to parents' concern, especially coaches or something like that. Let's see first.
Ms. Gaines,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Give me this, if you have this scenario, of some guy that's worked at the Navy Yard for 28 years, and he retires, but he knows how to work a certain kind of machinery, could you hire him over at the tech school to teach that particular machine or something, or whatever?
So those are instructional staff, so no, they would have to be coming to the full board.
Okay,
So this is non-instructional staff.
okay, okay.
I'm gonna make a motion because it's only for first reading and adoption, but I think the full board, I think this discussion should happen with the full board to see, because it's a brand new, and I think there are some concerns. So I don't think it's bad, so I'm gonna make a motion to move GDF to the full board for first reading.
Second.
But I do think it needs to be a full board discussion so that they're aware.
Okay, motion by Ms. Stokes, second by Mrs. Wigan. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. GDN, GDN and policy CM for deletion. That is evaluation of support staff. That's the old version of that. And then you want to explain CM?
Yeah, so they're actually the same. So AFD and GDN, for some reason, they're on our policies and they're the exact same policy. So if we're deleting AFD, GDN is exactly the same version. So I'm proposing that we delete that.
Okay. Do you want to talk about CM? That's
Oh, sure.
the,
Yes, definitely.
Annual report.
So in conversations with the SAU office, this is something that we've had in place, but we have not been, it's not been our practice, so we haven't been doing this annual report. And so I'm proposing that we delete it. It's not in our practice. We don't currently do it. Unless for some reason the board decides that we want to begin to have this annual report for our diversified activities. I'm guessing it's something that it's back from 1993, so maybe it's just a past practice, but then it was kind of like let go. And so I'm just proposing that we delete it. And it's not, and I did check the New Hampshire School Board Association. It's not a policy that they have.
Okay. Mr. Bellows, go ahead.
So this was a practice at the district up until the 2020-2021 city report, where a portion of the city report would include the district's report. I have read, kind of admitting some of my geekiness here, but I've read quite a few of these city reports, and some of the most interesting parts are the school reports. If you want to learn about the history of schools in this town, that's the best place to go and look for it. It goes all the way back to the 1800s.
Where is this?
Within the city reports, and you can access them in a variety of locations. UNH has a repository there on archive.org. The city website has some of the more recent ones. But it did cease, and the last one that was there was the 2020-2021 fiscal year. That's the last time, so it's been a couple years. I noticed it, the timing of this is interesting because I did notice, because recently I was doing research on the naming of schools and the history of that, and these were the resources that were allowing me to figure out that only once in modern history have we ever named a school after a person unless they donated the land or the money to build the school. And that was the tech center. At the time of opening, I should say that. But the city reports and the school district report within that is what allows me to find that information out. They're really useful for people that do that type of research. And if you're interested in the history of the schools in Rochester, like I really encourage you to look at it. Overcrowding has always been a problem in the city. You can see that in our schools. You can see that by looking at these reports. The relationship between our union and our administration has often been tenuous, and you can read that right in the reports. And I'm not sure where else you find that information nowadays. No one's reporting on it in the newspaper. So I can show you how to find it if you want. I do imagine that it's some work to produce them, but I do think it has value. I would encourage us to continue to do it, or start doing it again, actually.
Any other discussion?
Hi, Mr. Bellis.
Sure.
I know it only talks about diversified activities, but you mentioned so much more. I mean, so much more depth. I mean, that sounds actually amazing. But this policy only talks about diversified activities, and I'm not really quite certain what that even means.
May I?
Yeah.
I think I would just encourage you, and I can, maybe after I can just show you a good place to find them, but what I often remember seeing them, and they've kind of ebbed and flowed over the years, but it's really an opportunity for the superintendent to talk about, this is the awesome stuff that's going on in our schools. These are some challenges that we're facing. This is how we're hoping to address them. I would suspect, unfortunately I wasn't there at your State of the City speech, but I would suspect that a lot of what you talked about there would work its way into this type of report. Sometimes you would see things like budgets broken down or staffing, especially in the old days. I think you saw a lot more detail in these reports, but at a minimum, you're talking about construction projects that are going on in the district. You're talking about new initiatives that are being put out there, and again, they're really interesting historical records of where the district has been, where people that are in charge of the district want to see it go, and you can kind of bounce around and see, did we ever get there? Why did we stop talking about that? They're interesting. Maybe they're not a lot of people, but to some people, they are interesting records.
Thank you for that context.
Go ahead, Mr. Karen.
Just under the city charter, and I don't know that audit of city accounts and annual reports, I don't know how specific this gets to be. It just talks about an independent audit shall be made of all accounts of the city at least once every year by certified accountants, experienced municipal accounting. It talks about the audit of it, and the city manager shall prepare it. I don't know if that, I know we're independent of the city, but we are still a department of the city. So I don't, it's kind of a gray area. It may be a reach, but I don't know if an annual report, we fall subject to the same rules of annual audits and, to that extent. I'm just curious as far as it may not apply, but just curious about it.
So what do we, go ahead, Ms.
Well,
Casey.
I think, Dave, when the auditors come in, they do everybody, including the school department. It's, obviously, the city has the major portion of that report, but I think they
And again,
used to do the schools at the same time.
Shall prepare an annual public business report of the city's business, which shall be printed in sufficient number to provide a copy to each voter who requests one. I think times have changed. We're not necessarily printing them off, except for Sandy's, but well,
Right.
making it available. Just saying. I mean, so again, I don't know that it's a stretch or not, but
think they're
Historical
publicly available
documentation,
for-
if nothing else, it makes sense.
Do we want to table this and think about it for a month?
If I may, Mr. Pepper,
Sure.
I might actually be more inclined to retract the deletion because I really like what Mr. Bello said about this. I needed that context and I couldn't get it from, from the office unfortunately, but I think that there's so much value to that. I'm, for example, coming next month to the city council to talk about something that they've asked me to talk about. So this is a great opportunity to really showcase what we're doing in the district, the improvements, our challenges. I actually would recommend that I retract the deletion of it.
Which is fine, I'm wondering if we may want to change the wording of it so it doesn't say diversified, what is this, diversified activities or whatever it is, maybe clarified it a little bit better.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
So
I don't think we need to do anything.
we don't need to delete GDN.
Yeah, we would need to do that, yes.
So I will make a motion to delete, to bring it to the full board for first reading for deletion of GDN.
There a second? Okay, motion by Ms. Stokes, second by Mr. Cormier. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, motion passes. Administration recommends first reading policy DLD, which is employee stipends. And I think you have a suggestion or
Yes.
change to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So currently, we have stipends in the collective bargaining agreement, so we have to abide by them, we're mandated to pay them. And so my recommendation is that any stipend that's in the collective bargaining agreement that obviously the board has approved and has signed and executed, that they wouldn't necessarily have to come back to the board, the stipends, in order for us to pay out, for example, any of them that are in the collective bargaining agreement, that's one. And the other piece that I was recommending to change was, excuse me, it currently says stipends less, apart from the collective bargaining stipends, stipends of less than $500 paid to an individual typically would go to the board. I'm actually requesting that we change that because most stipends really are around that, so they're always coming to the board. So I would say anything over 1,000 would come to the board. It would just really streamline and increase efficiency if we were able to do that. So there's two things. One is if it's in the collective bargaining agreement, the board has already executed that agreement. If it's in there, it doesn't need to come to the board, we have to pay it out, we're actually by law have to do it. And then that's one, and the second thing is, if it's not in a collective bargaining agreement, anything over 1,000 would come to the board for approval, but anything under 1,000, I would have the ability to authorize.
So, I like it, I like the fact that, I think you and I had a conversation about if they're hourly employees, that they have to get paid their minimum wage. I think that even if it's not state, I would hope that even if somebody gets, like, you know what I mean, like, so looking at the athletic position, the stipend, we wanna make sure that if somebody's doing a stipend, that they're getting paid something for the work that they're doing and not 25 cents an hour.
Right.
So I wanna make sure that everybody is clear, if you get an hourly, you have to pay them, and I think it actually, they should get paid their hourly wage if they get, so I think just keeping that in mind. I hope that doesn't deter us from having somebody who's an hourly position take a stipend over somebody that's not, like, not an hourly position, because I don't think that would be fair. I would also say that I think there should be something in here that talks about collective bargaining, because I think when you're looking at it, you're looking at just employee stipends. And even if they're getting a stipend, I think maybe the first paragraph should say minus something that says anything that's a stipend that's through the collective bargaining does not factor in here, but I think when you're looking at it, I think we need to add something that talks about the collective bargaining for stipends so people don't get confused. So when you're talking about stipends paid less than, I'm fine with 1,000, you have to put something that says minus the collective bargaining, because again, we're not, like, those are already pre-approved, so.
It's actually in there, you can't see it, for some reason, this is my fault, when we uploaded it, it's not showing the additional language, which says, for example, I'm looking at stipends that are part of the collective bargaining agreement, either as a one-time stipend or cumulative over the course of the fiscal year. It actually is in there, would be signed by the superintendent.
Well, you could even make the policy like, you know, non-collective bargaining employee. You could, you know what I mean? I just
Yeah.
wanna make sure that it's separated, because I think that's important to make sure. Because when Sandy was talking about stipends, we said, oh, it's part of the collective bargaining, but there are stipends that aren't.
Right.
So I think we didn't even discuss that, so I think that has to make sure that it's separated.
Well, that's not my, your point is not my point. My point is, if you're the golf instructor and you got 4 kids on the golf team, or the fishing instructor and you got 5 kids on the team, and you're the tennis coach that has 20 kids on the team, there's a difference there.
Yep.
And I think we need to determine how that all works out. You know, your minimum wage is one thing, but I think I think there's a difference between those kinds of commitments that teachers have, or whoever the person is that makes that commitment
Can I
to
just
work with the
respond to
team, but.
Right, I was just saying, when you asked about the collective, when you asked about stipends,
no,
and it
I
was
guess
told
it's
it's part of the collective bargaining,
I know,
some of
it
them
didn't
aren't.
include the
So
one.
that's what I was saying, is they're two separate. So when you're asking about that, and they come back to you and say it's part of the bargaining, the collective bargaining, it's not necessarily true.
That's
So I
not
was-
an answer. And to me, that's only a partial answer. To me, we ought to look at the whole
Yeah,
system
Yeah, I agree,
and
that's
make
what I was
that,
saying.
and make it fair and equitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Dave has his hand up.
She clarified, I'm looking at the document, not seeing any changes, and I'm like, how can we take any action on anything, because there's nothing changed.
so I think we should, do you want to table it for next month?
Not that I'm taking any action on anything.
Right,
Can I propose?
certainly.
So based on my recommendations, which were those 2, can we say, you know, with amended changes, that we could approve the first reading of it? It's just the first reading.
I would be okay with it. I think what we used to have in proposed changes is any changes would be in red.
I know, it's in my computer, for some reason it didn't
Okay.
transfer to the document, but
Okay.
next time what I need to do is I need to scan it rather than linking it.
So I'll make a motion to approve the first reading to the full board of DLD with revisions that were discussed.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Motion by Ms. Stokes, second by Mr. Cormier. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. All right, BDA is board committee structure.
So this is the one, we can also table this one. This one is, has to go along with the other one, which is if the committee were to approve that the superintendent is authorized to hire non-certified staff, we'd have to change the board committee. So if you go down to the bottom of the first page where it says teaching and learning student supports, it would say that they would approve certified personnel rather than non-certified. And so we can table this one until we approve the other one. Or we can also approve this one in the first reading and send it to the committee.
Which is fine, but when you have the standing committees and you have 4, but when you go on to the bottom of the page and you have discipline, I know it's not a monthly standing committee, but I think it should be up there on an as-needed basis, or however you want to put it, but I think if you're gonna, you gotta fill 4, you have to add.
Yes. Thank
That
you.
would, yeah, that would be my only comment. Look, she's typing it right now.
Any other discussion on this? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to move BDA to the full board for first reading.
Okay, motion by Ms. Stokes, second by Mr. White. All those, or any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, and then the fun starts with the superintendent's evaluation. That's policy AFB-P.
So I suspect that you probably can't see these amended changes either, but I can walk you through which one. So we have 25 questions on this one, and I remember. 26. Yeah, thank you. And I remember from our last conversation, we were looking to, because the superintendent's evaluation, the first evaluation was done in November, we were looking to use the same one that we have currently in place, but just reducing the amount of questions. So what I've done is I've just removed, I believe, 5 questions. which a lot of them overlap with other questions. And a lot of those particular indicators would be very difficult for the full board to see if I'm actually meeting that mark. So I'm happy to walk through if you don't see the changes on the proposed 5 that I've deleted. And again, this is just temporarily until we develop a more robust evaluation for the end of the year.
So I think I did, I'm assuming other board members went through and put what we think we would like to do. I actually have 8 that I want to do. So my suggestion would be, I know there's 6 different sections. Can we potentially just go through each section and then maybe we can agree on ones to delete? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Just so that if you go through the whole thing, I'm just gonna get confused with some old.
Is the one you linked, is that the full, trying to determine, is
I
that
think
the
so.
full?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, so it seems like section 1, which is board relationship, that would all make sense to keep.
I agree, I put them all 5 to keep.
Yeah.
Okay. Section 2 is community relationships, and I highlighted all 4.
Section 2, I only highlighted question number 2 to delete. I didn't like that one, because we don't know if they're maintaining a high degree of understanding and respect between staff and the board. I have no idea. She maintains a lot of respect between staff, and then she remains, hopefully, but we don't see that. So I don't know if I can vote on that.
I deleted that one too.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
one?
Number 2,
Number 2, I'm with you.
that's the one I thought.
Oh, that's still on section number 1.
Nope, number 2. Oh, sorry, hold on, number 2
Board
was,
relationship.
the superintendent defends principals in the face of pressure or partisan influence.
Right.
You read the wrong one.
Sorry.
Okay. So whatever you guys want to do, it doesn't matter to me.
So you want to get rid of them?
I want to get rid of number 2. I don't know what her pressure is and partisan influence. I don't know that I could rate that. I'm assuming she handles it fine, and we would only hear of it if there's an issue, but I don't know that there's a way to rate her on that. Or any superintendent. But I like the other ones. I liked 1, 3, and 4.
Other thoughts? I highlighted it to keep it, but,
I-
go ahead, Ms. Wright.
I would want to see that kept as well. The reason I say that is because the superintendent, or the principals, the building principals need to know that the superintendent has their back in difficult situations. I'm not sure exactly how we evaluate that. That's another conversation.
That's the key.
That is a separate conversation, I think.
What does partisan influence mean? And it's
Could
not
be-
principals in the building.
could be-
Sorry.
Oh,
Political.
okay.
Do you know what I'm
It's
saying?
a wrong spelling
Yeah,
principle.
you're right.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying.
Building
If you can't rate it, how do you, and you also put it up for
I
deletion
did,
too. Can
I
you
did.
tell why?
Yeah, it's for the same reason. There would be no way for the board to be able to evaluate me on this, because they wouldn't be able to see it. Yeah,
I had it marked as a
Reading that
delete, but
with the proper
yeah.
phrasing of principle, I would agree with you.
Okay. Go ahead.
I haven't been through this process before, so I think I respect those who have the challenges. But I can think of situations where, you know, in my role, the principle of intellectual freedom is under attack out there in the community, or it's just a political issue, and the principal is standing up for their kids in that situation. So I'm just not sure how often that's going to be obvious, and therefore how do you evaluate it?
Correct.
But I can definitely see you having to defend principles of education.
Especially with the latest attack on removing books from libraries and things like that.
That's just one example, but yeah.
All right, how do we feel? Do we want to,
Do you want to do hand, I say delete it.
I'll second that.
I think we're all agreeing
Alright.
to delete it.
so, delete question number 2 on section 2. Any others in that section?
Nope.
Okay. Section 3, personnel supervision and evaluation. I highlighted question number 2, 3, and 6.
I highlighted 3 and 6 to keep, and I didn't think we needed the rest.
I had a problem with 1 and 4.
To delete?
No, no, I just have a problem. They seem to be, say the same thing.
If I may, I deleted the fourth one. I thought there was some overlap.
Only number
Only
four?
The fourth one.
Oh, I deleted 1, 2, 4, 5.
I'm not opposed to that.
Well, I think in previous years, we've had issues where the superintendent doesn't delegate to his or her staff, his staff, because we've only had male superintendents, and that became a problem, and it kind of festered on and on and on. So, you know, a good leader delegates to their subordinates.
So, number one, the superintendent treats all personnel fairly without favoritism or discrimination. I don't know that. I'm not seeing you daily, I'm seeing you at monthly meetings. There's no way for me to give you a 1 or a 5. So you're gonna get a 3, because I have no idea how to rate you on that. Now, if I'm in the school and my job is to be around you all the time and I shadow you, but again, that's gonna be a snapshot. So I'm not saying you don't, I'm saying I don't know how to rate you on that. So when I'm looking at like how to rate you for the year, I don't feel as though I can clearly rate you because I don't see you interact. My assumption is if you're here, you're doing it, but again, I don't know how to rate you on that. Number 2, do you want me to keep going? Sorry. I don't know if the board wants to talk about each one of this one.
Well, I'm wondering if it makes sense to just, let's take each question and determine whether or not we delete it or not.
Okay,
So, I agree with everything you said.
yeah.
Is everyone in agreement to remove number 1?
Yeah.
Mr. White, do you have some concerns?
I absolutely understand where Darren's coming from, I just hate to remove one that's that important to
But
make
how
sure
do you-
somebody's.
But how do you
How do you rate it though?
Right,
That's
I
the
got you.
thing.
I guess we could rate it by if teachers would,
But that
Start
part, we
complaining
also
to
talked
us.
about the 360 evaluation, and so that part would be, I feel like that would be answered with the 360, because staff are going to be able, that would be a question that I would think staff would be asked, like, does the superintendent treat you fairly, and then we would get the feedback from the 360.
But
That's how I would,
That 360 would then give us input to be able to answer that question.
that's where we're working towards. And similar questions to that, with this 360 evaluation we were working on, this would have been a subgroup of that evaluation members. And that a question like that would have gone out to administration or whatnot, that has that daily interaction with the superintendent for their input. So that, because you're absolutely right, we deal with them, you know, twice a month, maybe 3 times a month. And we're not there, and
Correct.
what we are getting for feedback is hearsay,
correct,
honestly.
and sometimes you'll answer
So,
that.
right, so when we were working previously on a 360 evaluation, this question would have gone under the administrators or teachers' part of, you know, the 360 evaluation, where it could have been answered or evaluated appropriately.
Is that what we decided that?
Okay.
I think what we're gonna do is pull out questions we want to give the current superintendent this year.
Yeah,
So
I-
this will still
I don't
stay
know that.
intact so that we can make the changes after November.
Right, and just to follow up on that, and I know I'm not part of this, but we dissolved the 360 evaluation process
Why?
because the board said, we're not doing it. At that was back.
We can bring it back.
Yeah.
I understand. So what we need to concentrate on is what the current superintendent is going to be evaluated on. The only thing we have is what's in our current policy, so we need to amend that if in a timely fashion to make it happen when it happens.
So what I would like to do is at least pick out what questions do we want to ask the current, or evaluate the current superintendent on. And I don't think we have the data to answer number one.
Are we taking a straw poll?
Currently.
Correct. So,
Can I just get a show of hands, like if people support eliminating number one for now?
For now.
For now, for the current superintendent? Okay.
Just a question as well. So, Annie, you said that you had deleted, you said 5 or 6 questions out of it. So would we be best to look at the questions that Annie has deleted? So we know where we're kind of starting from as far as
Sure.
what she would feel would be appropriate for an evaluation process for her for this year? And then see what questions we feel need to be put back in or potentially that's a solid product that we work with for this year's evaluation.
Sure, we could do it that way.
so are we doing it by section, like which ones in section 3 would she delete? Because she already said she would delete 4, number 4, right?
I'm happy to start at the beginning where it's this board relationship and just name the 5 that I had chosen.
Okay.
And again, it was only based on whether it's overlapping with another indicator, or it's just, it would be very difficult for you to give me a score based on our interactions, right? So, for example, under board relationship, I had actually deleted number 2. The superintendent works toward creating and maintaining a high degree of understanding and respect between staff and the board. How would, so, but I deleted because I'm not quite sure how you would be able to determine that. That's one. We go to the next section, I had deleted the same one that Karen had
So
said,
can-
that never starts.
Can we just
Oh,
talk
yes.
about the one that you wanted to delete?
Oh, yes.
Because we all agreed that we would keep all of them in section 1, so I don't want to go through it all and go back. So, in that one, I feel like we do see you with staff and board. I see you at football games, I see you when you're talking about things you're bringing before the board. I see you when you, so I feel like I can rate you on that because it also talks about the board. So I think if you were gonna look, like tweak it, you could remove staff, but I do think that we see a high degree of understanding because when you're talking to us, just like you did about the cell phone. So when I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, she's going to involve staff and students when she's talking about a cell phone policy. So I feel as though I can rate you on that because you're talking to staff and then your job is to bring it to the board. And I feel like I could rate you on that for that reason. You're including staff and you're showing that by talking for them at board meetings.
You're absolutely right.
Sorry, that was
You're
my
right.
reason for
You're
keeping it.
This is why we talk these things out.
Yes, yes, thank
Okay.
you, Member Stokes. And I had to leave the same one that Member Stokes had under community relationships, which is the second one. I think that would be very difficult to observe. I think we all decided to delete them.
Yeah.
And then in the next section, I had deleted the fourth indicator, the superintendent represents the best interest of the board in working with teachers and their organization.
I had that one on delete too.
Yeah.
I also had a couple of others.
Everyone good on deleting this one?
And then in the next section, I had deleted the first
Oh,
one. Oh,
Can we
yes.
just stay in section 3 really? Are we good with all the other ones?
I think Member White wanted us to go through all of it first.
All of them? Okay.
And then.
So then we're just gonna backtrack back? Okay.
Under educational leadership, I had deleted the first one, the superintendent participates with the staff, board, community in studying, problem solving, and developing curriculum and instructional improvements.
I had that one. I deleted 2 and 4.
So the reason why I had deleted this, I don't develop curriculum and instructional improvements, right? So that's really Dr. Bryant's. I oversee her work, I support and monitor her work, but I'm not directly involved in developing the curriculum and instructional improvements. So I just didn't feel like that was anything that, it wasn't that it overlapped or that you weren't able to observe, it was just that it's not the work that I
So why don't we, instead of developing, we can change that word to overseeing?
Yes, we can certainly do that.
I think the big thing for me is education should be the most important thing. So if you're gonna give it to Allison, you have to be held responsible for it. So I think when I read it and you're participating with staff, if you align that with Allison, you still have to supervise her to make sure that whatever decision she makes is a good one. the same as hiring. You send that hiring to the board, but you're not always involved in all of the processes, but I would assume if we come up with some new curriculum or some instructional improvements, you have either input, you've been to meetings, you've heard what's being said, and you approve it. Because if not, that would be a concern. So for me, I look at it as when we're talking about problem solving, you know, we're talking about the phones or the Wi-Fi, or, you know, just looking at examples from tonight. You don't tell, like, you're not dealing with the operations, but yet you oversee them all. So looking at you and saying, is she solving problems that we're addressing? I feel like that's something that I can rate you on. That was the only reason I said. And I feel when we're talking about curriculum, that should be the most important part of your job, is making sure that they're doing theirs.
We could
I
change
would,
that.
I would just say, perhaps we say to Mr. White's point, instead of participates, supports and monitors.
Okay. Does the rest of the board feel okay with that?
Supports and monitors
Curriculum.
curriculum and instruction improvements.
That was the only one in that section I deleted, and then if you go down to business and finance, I had deleted the first one, the superintendent has an understanding of the needs of the school program, facility. I do, I just don't know if you all would be able to know that, the degree of that, right?
I actually have to, I deleted number 2 in that section, just because I feel like you come before the board and you talk about all of our program, we know about all the issues with the buildings. You were the one that brought up William Allen and the, you know, so I don't wanna take that down, because if there is an issue with our buildings and our buildings being old, I feel like that is something that you do present to us, and I do think that you present all the needs that are going on, especially with like the 5-year, or this is, we're seeing this as an issue, we're seeing that as an issue. And we discuss the budget all the time, so I think you give us updates on the budget and how it's going, so.
Fair enough, yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
And just to comment on the first one, the superintendent has an understanding of the needs of the school program. For me, I guess, we're not always going for supplemental appropriations. We're not going over budget. Unfortunately, we typically return a lot of money back. So that would be an indicator of, you know, your understanding and the needs, right? We're building our budget appropriately at the beginning of the year and managing our budget appropriately throughout the year, so that we don't have to go for supplementals and whatnot. So for me, that's kind of the indicator for that question, in some respects, when I read it.
Happens great.
No, it's a good discussion.
But number 1 is very similar to number 3. Making sure that the money's there, adequate budgeting, accounting, spending.
So,
I
yeah, and
almost think you could get rid of 3.
I also think you could get rid of 2. How do you, she supervises everybody. How do we know how well she supervises? And how do we know that she's insisting on, I mean, I don't know how I rate that, because I don't see her supervising. I expect that she's doing it, but I don't know how to rate her on it. I say her because it's you, but I'm saying any superintendent. Please know that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to rate you on that. I know you're doing it. I don't see it.
Right. So, in my mind, we haven't made any decisions on this section. So what do we want to do in section 5?
I would say you delete number 2, and I would say you remove the budget section from section 1 and keep it for the other parts, and then you keep section 3. Or you delete 2 and 3. But I think the budget is kind of something that's important, so maybe we want to rate her on the budget. So I would say if you keep number 1 and 3, get rid of the budget section on the first question and just do it where the needs of the school programs, facilities, equipment, and supplies. And then you keep number 3 as just the budget, because keeping in line with our budget is kind of important, because we have a tax cap. And then delete number 2, because
changing the wording right on.
Yeah, she would, I would say she would remove just the budget requirement.
But also.
Is everybody good with that?
Yes.
Mr. White, you look deep in thought, so.
I am, yeah, I'm just trying to read over the rest of that, because the budget encompasses the equipment, supplies, budget required for all of it, facilities, again, all of that is encompassed within the budget. So for us to just get rid of and the budget required.
Because if you look at
Three would be the
says
budget.
measure
I
the
just-
funds spent, so
I
that's the
like the
budget.
wording of number one better than any of number three. So my thoughts would be get rid of three.
Could you combine it all into one?
Well,
Could you say, and spending money wisely?
Yep.
I think the only concern with that for me, and I'm fine if that's what the consensus, the only concern with me is the budget encompasses a lot, right? It encompasses vehicles, it encompasses stipends, it encompasses like staff money, it encompasses like Dave said, how much money we give back, it encompasses technology. So I think when I'm looking at the budget, I would want to rate her on how she's fiscally doing the budget, and then also how she's, because a facilities update may not have a budget requirement. So that's why I said put both, but just separate it as far as the budget, because then I can rate her on how well she does the budget, but I could also rate her on how well she updates, hey, we have a problem, there's like a roof leaking, and we're able to catch it quickly. It doesn't really affect the budget, but it affects the facility. So that's the reason I was thinking separate them, but if you want to encompass them all at one, that's fine too.
Well, if we look at number one, it's more of the superintendent has an understanding of the need.
Right.
And then number three is how is it
How
being
is she
spent?
spending
Right.
it?
Yeah. I mean, if there aren't, if she doesn't have competent people, she's gonna get rid of them, isn't she? So that, I don't think number two, I think number two is superfluous.
I think number two needs to be deleted.
Yeah, I
Correct.
think it's,
Can we agree that we'll just delete number two
Correct.
Yeah.
and keep number one and
Yeah,
three? Oh,
actually.
Yeah, one and three.
Do you want to remove the budget part of
and
number
I
one?
would, I think we ought to reword number three though,
Well, number one is understanding the
Okay.
needs for budget.
right? And number two is assures that adequate controls and accounting are maintained. And
Yeah.
leave out that spend wisely, kind
Now,
of.
keep in mind, well, number two, if we're looking at that, I mean, we're only judging her on 4 months' worth of work.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think we all agree with deleting number two though.
So if we delete number two,
Management of the budget that she was in the process of making. to begin with.
so everyone good on number two? And the second question then?
Yeah, so we're deleting number two.
Yeah. Okay.
And then strategic planning, I kept all three.
So did I.
Yep.
And that's it, actually, and then we can go back up to the front to review the other questions if you'd like.
So I think it's only section three that we have to still review.
Well, I got a question on section 7, that's the superintendent's own personal goals, so that's an opportunity for you to create your own goals, and I didn't know whether you wanted to keep something like that?
I would actually like to be held accountable for the strategic plan.
Okay.
The community really created it, and so I want to make sure everything we do is aligned to that.
Okay, and that is pretty lofty anyway, I mean, and
I'm
it's,
very ambitious.
okay.
So we could put that in as the goal. Are you saying delete it?
Well, in section 7, that would be for her to come to the board with saying, this is what I want to be judged on.
Okay.
And
And-
shouldn't we have a paragraph that says
I'll
what,
feel it.
if we, what we want for goals, or what we agree with, or something like that? We need to, what goals we've accepted, that's, I mean, she may have goals that are different than ours.
I agree, and I agree the strategic plan is just a measure of, or measuring points of that strategic plan. Obviously, you've been here for 6 months. It's 4 months. All right.
Bad.
But we have to have points of that strategic plan and to be able to have measurable, you're hitting it, you know, where we at on it, whatever, for the evaluation process anyway. And I think for this evaluation, literally, it turned out last month, you know, maybe some short-term goals from this evaluation to the next or something, where it's, this evaluation is being compressed in a shortened period of time. The strategic plan moving forward may be a good one, but for what we're evaluating on her past, not and then that section is our measure for the next evaluation. So the strategic plan makes sense, as long as there's measured points along the way of.
Can I make a suggestion for that? I know that one of the key points that we've been trying to do is really repair the relationship with staff, with the community. Maybe it's about really, you know, what are we doing to build my trust and credibility, right, in the community? So that could be, I can formulate that goal, bring it back to the committee and see what we think, because I think that's essential for us to move the needle as to build that trust and credibility.
Well, and I think it's your goal, so.
Yeah.
I think, you know what I mean, you get to go back and think about it and present one goal or 3 goals, or, yeah, so I think that's a good one, but I think you could also think about other, you know what I mean, I feel like we're just talking about whether or not you keep it, and I think it sounds like we want to keep it.
I will say, this is the one that's going to be, the board has to evaluate next month. So if I were to devise superintendent's goals, I'm not sure I'll be able to achieve them in a month, but, so I'm not sure if we say, we're just going to, I don't know, it's something to keep in mind, because the policy does read that we have to, you all have to evaluate me by November. And so if I begin
Yeah.
creating these personal
Well,
goals,
you don't have any current goals right now. You would be writing goals for the next evaluation.
got it.
Correct, so technically, section 7 would be, if
For
you
next
were,
year.
if you were here for several years, you would have given us 3 goals, and that's what would be put in here.
Got it.
You have
Okay.
not done that yet.
Got it.
So you would give us goals, we would put it in here, and then next year, we would rate you on the goals that you gave us. So you would just be presenting goals that we would say yay or nay to.
That makes sense.
Okay.
So can I go over, just make sure we're all in agreement that what we agreed
We
to,
haven't gone through section 3 and 4. She only told us what she wanted.
okay? Go back to section 3.
So I think we agreed on deleting 1 and 4, but I wanted
Section 3?
section 3. I think we need to look at number 2 and number 5 and make sure it's something that we can rate you on. So number 2 is the superintendent delegates authority to staff members appropriate to the position each holds. Do we feel as though we can evaluate her on that? Because I don't believe that we can. I believe she delegates, but unless we're gonna have her come to a meeting and start telling us who she's delegating and what she's delegating, can we rate her on that?
I don't think that's a bad thing to have in here, because we've had experience with past superintendents, names left out, who did not do that, who put people in positions that they were not qualified for. So I'm not suggesting this superintendent's gonna do that, but I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to eliminate, a good thing to eliminate.
Is it appropriate, though, for the current superintendent, only been on the job for 4 months, or should we
Well,
keep it for the next?
Do we wanna rewrite this next year, and the year after that, and the year after that?
think
I mean,
we-
I think you have sort of a master plan for your evaluation, and maybe change 1 or 2 of the questions along the way in the next 3 years, but not have changed over every single question.
Right, but I look at hiring and delegating as 2 different things. We already have the staff. If she's delegating them, how do we know what she's delegating? How do we rate that when we're evaluating her, is my question. So I agree with you, the hiring of staff, I think that's maybe something we add, but delegating, I don't know what she delegates. Yeah, I have no idea.
Well, I don't know, but obviously we had an explanation last week of math scores and all of that. That was obviously delegated, right? And to the team, whoever that team is, your
Yeah.
coordinators there, and Allison. Kelly's hands up.
Go ahead.
But the question right after is, the superintendent recruits and assigns the best available personnel.
I said to keep that.
That's like the
Yeah.
same, that could be kind of like the same area.
Sure.
We know if she hires somebody good, we're gonna know pretty quick,
Correct,
but how do we know if she delegates?
right.
Now, Sandy made a
That's
good
what I
point,
mean-
do we think that's enough when somebody comes and presents? Do we consider that enough?
Right.
I don't know.
May
Yeah.
I? The other thing I'll say is even for committee meetings, right, so if you'll notice, I'll delegate to Ms. Camus, that she was the one that reported out the special education. I really want to build everyone's capacity so that, again, building those systems so that when someone fills my position in the future, they're able to just continue the work. And so to your point, Ms. Member Keyes, that is true. You should be able to see that I'm really empowering my staff to you know.
But that's number 5, empowering. So I feel like 2 and 5 are the same then, because if you're delegating, you're
Yes.
empowering.
You are
So
right.
which one do you like better?
Empowering.
Thought so.
So can we eliminate number 2 and
And
be
keep
okay
number
with that for
5?
now?
Keep,
Yeah.
Five? Everyone okay with that?
Oh, sorry.
Any others that people want to?
Can we revisit number 1?
Yep.
So the 360 that we were discussing, so that doesn't exist currently. So how else could we potentially get that feedback from staff?
I think we talk about bringing back the 360 for next year.
Right.
I think this board could.
Go ahead.
Just as a point, again, to kind of answer Sandy, we're not so this evaluation you're working on right now is for next month,
Correct.
Yes.
right? So bringing back the 360 would address that, but it means we're gonna have to revisit this policy
Yeah, I
again.
think we should.
So it would, you know, we are gonna have to rewrite this again.
Correct.
We need to address the immediate need of next month's evaluation. But that's an appropriate question for a 360, and are we gonna bring the 360 back? That's for the board to decide.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ms.
Sorry, I wasn't talking about this evaluation not being changed. What I'm saying is, we should adopt something post 90 November or something like that, that we're not gonna have to visit all the time and say, oh, what is that, you know, what is that? That we should have a comprehensive evaluation in 25 questions or so, that we can look at every year and maybe tweak 1 or 2 questions in the 25. I just don't think we want to rewrite the whole thing. I saw that on the city council, and it was a disaster.
So to follow back, so we're looking at deleting 1, 2, and 4
For this 4-month?
for this 4-month period, and then the discussion will be to either bring back 360 or to bring back the 360 evaluation, because then we could evaluate it based on the 360, we wouldn't do it in this one. So, are you comfortable with, sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you comfortable with 1, 2, and 4 being deleted?
I am.
It's right here.
Yeah, so my fear with number 1, long-term, is nothing with the end. It's down the road if we have a different superintendent. And that's where I think it's a very important evaluation tool.
But by then we'll have a 360 in place.
Hopefully.
Well,
Well, we vote on it, so I think we have a lot of people's support. I also want to say that we hear a lot of negative, right? We do. So without that 360 eval, when you're looking at rating this from past, and Matt could probably, you hear a lot when they're mad at the superintendent, and you never hear when they're happy, because when they're happy, they're happy and they're.
quiet.
So it's very hard to rate that unless you have a 360 eval that asks them directly, are you happy? Does she treat you fairly? Does she favoritism? Does she discriminate? So without asking those questions to staff, and you really can't, there's no way to evaluate that. So I'm in support of bringing back the 360. It sounds like other board members are. So I think that would resolve that. But I think unless you're gonna call people and ask them, which you can't, it makes it very difficult. Treat people fairly.
So for the current, for the evaluation for next month, we're keeping 3,
5 and 6.
3, 5, and 6.
Yep,
Ready to move on?
yep. I think the
Okay.
only other one is section 4. 'cause we've
Section
gone over
4.
the other one.
Yep. We talked about changing the wording of number 1 to the superintendent supports and monitors curriculum and instruction improvement.
So, number 2, we don't really know about staff evaluations. We don't know about improvement plans. That's not something that we're ever supposed to know. So we can't rate you on if you, like, so you would have to come to us and say, hey, I put Paul Cormier on an improvement plan in order for us to rate you on that, and we don't get that information. So I don't feel that we could rate
Well, we've
somebody.
adopted a policy on how the evaluation should work for staff, right?
Well, it says it superintendent
And if we see
maintains
that,
it.
and if we see a I'm gonna see, lack of a better word, violation of that policy, then maybe, but other than that, we're not gonna,
We're not gonna know, and we
Yeah,
would only
right.
know if they didn't. I don't wanna rate you and then be like, well, I have no data. If I have no
Well,
data, I can't
I
rate you
mean-
high or low.
is our policy, is she gonna maintain a comprehensive program of staff evaluation? Or is she gonna rely on our policy of staff evaluations? We just adopted one earlier, didn't we?
She's gonna rely on our policy.
She follows our policy.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I assume, so I don't think we need this.
That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah,
agree with you, Sandy.
yeah.
Does anybody else?
I agree with that.
I agree.
So we'll delete number 2.
And then the last one I have was 4. The superintendent creates an environment that consistently encourages staff to strive for improvement and encourages them to be innovative in problem solving. Again, I assume she's doing it. How do we rate her on that? My concern would be we only hear about it if she's not doing it, which is a very low percentage. How do you equitably measure something like that, unless you added that in the policy?
Did anyone record your opening message to the staff? I mean, that.
Right, but we weren't there.
For creating an environment, you can walk into a room
Yeah.
and tell the environment without even talking to anybody, I think.
I'm fine with keeping
mean,
it, those are
within-
just the ones I put, yeah.
I mean, if I walk into a room, you can tell if there's anxiety with people or if she's doing her job and she creates a good environment, people are gonna be willing to talk to you and willing to.
But when do you walk in the building? That's the question.
Oh my God, I'm there a lot, because I get a lot of printouts.
Right, but like the 12 other ones, are they there? How do we know?
Okay, Ms. Keene's had her hand up and
I
then
know.
Mr. White.
I agree with you, we wouldn't necessarily know, but if things weren't happening, we'd know that pretty quick, right?
But you
That's
rate
how
her
I
on just
see
the
it, but
one-
because I think, if I see a math scores go up 20 points, and the reading scores go up 20 points, I'm gonna be pretty happy that somebody's encouraging and striving for innovation in something.
But if they don't go up, are you rating her low?
No, I leave it in here and I give her a 2, whatever that IN,
In need of
OIS.
improvement.
Okay, Mr. White.
I'm sorry.
So I would look at just last week's presentation alone, with the data that was shared with us and that data going out to staff. That is preparing the staff for them to understand where improvements are needed and then encouraging them to be innovative in that problem solving of low scores, how do we get to higher scores? So I think there is different ways to read that question and different ways to evaluate it. I do understand what you're saying as far as a physical environment. How do we really rate that if we're not in the buildings?
The only thing I'll add is I think we should actually keep this because, to your point, Member White, the reports to the superintendents, the reports we're doing even in the committees, right? Like the perfect example was today, looking at things differently, the undercover anti-bullying, team approach, bringing our new positive youth development director, thinking outside the box. I think things like that will be noticeable and that you're seeing that I'm attempting to create an environment where we're really being creative, innovative, on behalf of moving the needle.
And I'm fine with keeping it. When I look at staff though, I look at bottom to the top. So I'm not seeing cafeteria staff come and present, I'm not, how do we strive for that? So I think you are striving, but when I'm looking at it and you're presenting, I don't know when you're presenting, if staff was encouraged to strive for that, or is that something that you said, hey, we have this new bullying initiative, staff was really pushing for this, and this, like, so I think it's great, but when I see something like that, I don't know who did it, who was encouraged to do it, so if it is staff, great, but I wasn't aware, I'm just gonna use the bullying one as an instance, I wasn't aware that this came from a staff initiative that came to you and said, hey, we need this, and you're like, okay, great, let's present it to the board. Now, if that's the case, great, I need to see that every other month, right, if I'm gonna be able to rate and want it. So if that's what we're saying is great, but I didn't get the impression that those things were from staff initiative wanting to strive for something more. So that's where I'm coming from. But we can keep it, I don't care. If you guys think it's keepable, we'll keep it.
Keepable? Way to go.
Except for 750.
Go ahead,
New
Mr.
word.
Perry.
Again, not to belabor it, but it's, and I'm gonna say she because Anne's
Yeah.
our current superintendent, but she creates the environment that consistently encourages staff. So again, it's just, she's not directing, right? She's creating the environment. And again, it goes to the holistic look at the whole district in whether it be, our morale, just our general, the district, whether she's specifically telling somebody to go after bullying policy, or they're seeing a need, the staff is seeing a need, and fulfilling that need. She's encouraging the environment, right? It's a matter of the good workplace, so that, climate culture, right? That's kind of more of a climate culture type of question. And again, an example of not encouraging that would be the staff coming to us saying, she doesn't listen to anything we tell her. We tell her we've got this problem, or whatever, and that she's open. She's encouraging staff to bring these problems or betterments, not always problems, but ways to better our district. She encourages that through her interaction, visiting the schools, things like that, getting the feedback. So the measure is the climate culture, to me, in how our superintendent creates the environment being the climate culture.
Can I just ask you a question though?
Yeah.
So how do you measure climate and culture if you're not in the building? And I'm honestly asking, because.
Again, kind of going back,
Yeah.
the lesser, the less negative feedback we get. And again, so just kind of back up a little bit, a 3, right? I hate these rating sets, right?
Yeah.
1 to 5, first off. But a 3 is, everything's good. We're not getting a lot of complaints. We're not, right? Everything's pretty good. If she's gonna get a 5, there better be something substantive written in there that specifically says, boom, 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 she did this, and she, concrete samples to get a 5. Same with a 1. If she's gonna get a 1, there better be something concrete that.
Right, and I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand it. So I guess my question is, if everything's going smooth, I don't think it's fair to say she only gets a 3. I'm using you as an example. Because I don't know if I want to be able to rate somebody and be able to say they can achieve a 5. My concern is, and if you disagree, I just want to make sure that when we're rating it, I'm rating it in the same mindset that you are. If she can't get to a 5, is it something that should be on there? If I don't, and you hear a lot of negative, but that doesn't mean that that's the reflection of the climate and culture. So I guess are you saying that if everything's going really, really well, but you're not hearing anything, but the culture and climate's good, it would be a 3? Hypothetically.
without specific examples, I guess, and I kind of, you're right, I don't know what those I mean, to sit here and read that and to say, give a specific example, maybe you can help me with it, I don't know. You
Well,
know,
that's why I'm saying, is it something that we can rate? I want to rate you a 5 if I possibly can. If I can't get there, is it fair to you, is my question.
Is this something that I would be able to fill in, like evidence?
No.
Oh, I see, okay.
Well, yeah, and that's, again,
To be a good 360.
well, and that's, and I think that's why we were headed that way, and I
Yeah.
don't want to belabor it, and
No, I know.
but I think that's why, and these questions came up, and you're right, because we need the supporting documentation sometimes, or, you know, the justification
Right.
for why you deserve a 5. And, you know, we may not physically see it at every meeting, and
Yeah.
again, 1 to 3 times a month that we're
Correct.
interacting. You know, is that a great 360 question that goes out to the administration?
Yeah.
More so than us? Probably fits better in that category than it does at the board level.
And I thank you, because I really was just trying to figure out how to rate it, and I personally think it's not.
I don't disagree with you, but
Yeah.
you know,
No, I
I
get it.
just, it's the environment.
Ms. Williams, Mrs. Williams, and Ms.
We have
Keys.
heard feedback about, on Facebook about visiting school, and her being in schools. And we heard, or at least I have heard the jamboree, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Heard several comments about the opening, excuse me, staff jamboree. Like I've heard multiple comments
For striving for improvement.
for, yeah, just the whole climate and culture. That I could probably rate towards that.
I didn't read this as climate and culture, so maybe we just reword it to climate and culture?
Let's
Thank
strive
you.
for improvement. That's
I
how
would
I would take
improvement
it.
as like math scores going higher, or reading scores going higher.
So instead of going back
Yeah.
and forth,
Yeah, Karen, I would just suggest that if you have 6 principals resign in 6 years, or you have 45 teachers resign in a year, that there's something wrong with the culture and the environment.
Correct.
And I'm not sure that that necessarily means the superintendent gets a 2 or a 1 or a 3. But I think that what other things you see besides that could be, you know, move her up to, or him up to 1 or 2.
I got most of what I want, so if you guys all want
Yeah.
something, I'm fine. I'm not complaining.
Mr. Wright, I think you had your hand up.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm fine with taking a straw vote, if you guys, I didn't read it as a culture of climate. I read it more as like academic improvement and striving for that. That's how I read it. So
Okay.
if you guys are reading it the other way, I can go that way.
So let's take a look at number 4 here, and do we want to keep it or do we not?
Well, what's your opinion?
I think we should keep it.
My opinion is I don't have one at the moment. I'm the chair.
I'm gonna vote to delete it. I can't give you a 5, so so I don't know. I would vote to delete it, but
I'm gonna go with yours.
who votes to keep it?
I want to keep it.
All right, then we keep it.
Me too.
All right. And I think that is everything. So just looking through,
Do you want me to recap it, because I wrote it down?
I did too. So we're going to keep everything in section 1.
Yeah,
Section 2, we're getting rid of number 2.
yeah,
Section 3, we're getting rid of 1, 2, and 4.
yeah,
Section 4, we are deleting number 2
and 1.
and changing number 1.
Changing.
So it says the superintendent supports and
Oh,
monitors
yep, all right, yep,
um,
changing 1,
curriculum and instruction improvement.
okay,
And then section 5, we're deleting number 2.
yep,
Number 6, we're keeping.
yep.
And there's no need for number 7 because we don't have the goals.
So we're deleting 7.
Deleting all of
No,
section
1,
7.
2, 3, 4,
for this.
5, 6.
No, she's saying 7
We're
questions.
deleting 6 questions, is that what you have in changing 1?
Questions.
I will tell you right now.
Deleting 6 questions and changing 1.
5,
Matt, I was
6.
pretty pleased with this. that we brought it last month.
6 questions,
I
yes.
thought we did it.
And changing that 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have to, I would assume, have to make a motion to the full board to have the full board use this as the superintendent's evaluation for this year. So,
So I'll make a motion that we send AFB-E superintendent's evaluation to the full board for first reading with the amendments that we've made.
Second.
Okay, is it, we're not necessarily changing the policy permanently, we're just using this
For this year.
changes for this year only.
So I will amend my motion to say for this year, and then we will be looking at it later.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing, you good?
That's a good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Think about one.
Okay. There, public comment, there's no public to comment. Is there any other? Yep.
Thank you. So I do appreciate that some movement has been made in reaching out to staff and students to discuss the use of smartphones in our schools. But I still think it's worth this committee to consider putting it on the agenda in the future. And really what I want to talk about, what I was planning on talking about, despite the news that you shared, is the input of our staff and our students can certainly help us understand what policy might look like, and absolutely their input will be necessary to understand how we would implement that policy. But if the board believes that there is a why and why we need to restrict or eliminate students' access to smartphones during the school day, then we can decide that that has to happen regardless of the input of other groups. I still think there's value to getting their input, because perhaps some staff at certain levels don't think it's as big of a problem, but I have my own firsthand experience with this, and I'm pretty convinced that this is something that is going to make a difference in our kids' lives. So I want to resubmit an issue that I believe is crucial to improving our students' academic success, and that's the unrestricted use of smartphones during the school day. I want to recognize that the hard work of our teachers. So many of them, they already have established classroom rules to limit the use of phones in their room. They're doing everything they can to keep students focused, but the reality is that even the best managed classrooms are still dealing with distractions from smartphones. When these devices are in students' pockets or in bags, the temptation to check them, whether for social media, text, or games, is always there. And for teachers, this adds yet another layer of management in an already challenging classroom environment. What's more, the presence of smartphones isn't just a classroom management issue, it's a distraction that affects students' performance across the board. A study from the London School of Economics showed that schools banning smartphones saw a 6% improvement in student test scores, especially among lower performing students. And this tells us that addressing smartphone use isn't just about individual classroom rules, it's about creating an environment that supports all students academically. I believe there's an opportunity for us to make a real difference, and I urge the committee to put this on the agenda for further discussion so we can explore ways to adopt a district-wide policy on smartphone use. Let's make sure our classrooms remain spaces focused on learning. In addition to its impact on academic achievement, we must also consider the toll smartphones take on students' mental health. Again, I want to acknowledge that our teachers are already navigating these challenges daily. They set rules, they monitor, they manage. But the reality is, it's tough to prevent students from using their phones under desks, in the hallways, or during breaks. It's just one more thing for them to manage, and that's on top of all their other responsibilities. But beyond classroom management, we also need to think about how these devices are affecting our students emotionally. The constant access to social media, messaging apps, and notifications means students are dealing with a flood of content that increases anxiety and social pressure. According to the Royal Society for Public Health, social media use during the school day has been shown to heighten feelings of depression, anxiety, and even lead to issues like body image concerns. The mental health of our students is at stake, and as educators and leaders, we have a duty to create a healthier environment for them. Even when students aren't using their phones in class, they often find ways to check them between periods or request to leave class just to use them. This unproductive behavior disrupts their learning and creates additional challenges for teachers. We can't expect our teachers to shoulder this burden alone, and we shouldn't ask our students to manage these distractions by themselves. That's why I'm asking the committee to formally take up this issue, discuss it in depth, and consider a district-wide policy that will reduce smartphone access during the school day. This would benefit not only student learning, but also their overall well-being. Thank you.
If I may, would it make sense to have an ad hoc committee of board members look at this issue, or keep it here? And because if we create an ad hoc, maybe we can have, that ad hoc committee can then talk to the student groups and hear all the input and make a recommendation to the full board or to this committee. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So, thank you, Member Bellows. I've implemented cell phone policies in 2 of my prior districts, and we've found success when we have the student voice and educator voice, and I know that you totally support that, because instituting a cell phone policy without their voice is not enforceable. It's very, very difficult to enforce because they haven't had a voice. I've had great success doing it with, incorporating the voices of students, of educators, and then it's been different in both of my prior school districts. They've implemented different cell phone policies for different reasons, and they've both been successful. And so I don't, at this time, due to my prior experience, anticipate needing an ad hoc. I think I'd start with these conversations with the Educator Advisory Council, really, start navigating that with the students. My plan is that sometime in the early spring is coming to the Governance Committee with a cell phone policy that has fingerprints of our students and our educators and our district leaders, our building leaders, and so that I would, at this moment, I don't think it's a need.
Okay. One thing to just kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're navigating all these different groups is, as Mr. Bellows said, is the passing time, because I know the high school in my district, they came and they said no phones in the class, but during passing time they can use them. And that's creating problems because they can't wait to get out of the room and start texting, and that causes all the problems again.
If I may.
So, but,
We implemented a policy in one of my school districts that were the caddies, right? They would put their phones in the caddies, they would go to the class, and then on their way out, they would pick up their phone, and then during transition time, they would utilize their cell phones, and then they would put it back in the caddy. It was so entrenched in what they would do that a lot of times they would forget their phones in the caddies. They would walk out of class because they were already not used to using the cell phones. It was highly successful. And then for those students, to your point, Member Bellows, that it's almost like a withdrawal, like they need their phone. It's actually helpful for them during that transition time to have that little bit, right? Because we know with children, if you take everything away, they're gonna find a way, right? So it's really finding that compromise where they have access to it during those times that they're moving between, and that's just one way of implementing a cell phone policy. That's not, in my other school district, we did it differently. But I've seen it successful in both ways. And again, once you implement that habit, because it's really a habit, a lot of times the children would leave classroom forgetting their cell phone in the caddy.
I also think different grade levels, elementary, middle school, and high school are different. So I'm just commenting on potentially the high school. We're also teaching kids to be successful in the workforce, and to say you can't have it all isn't really teaching them that when they get a job, you can use it during break time and your lunch. So I think we want them to be successful adults, and there are times that are appropriate for us to use our cell phones, and there are times when it's inappropriate to use our cell phones. So I think educating them on that part too, to be successful when they go into the workforce, I think is very important. I do think that it is a hindrance on teachers and staff, but I also think we also, as if you're a parent and you're staying over for a practice and we don't know what time practice gets and give me a call when you're there, if you're saying they can't be there and they're taking the bus or whatever, it's going to cause a problem if students or children need to call their parents after, or to not have their cell phone. We don't have pay phones like Eric and I used to have when we were young. Call it out again. But I think it's going to be like, I had a pay phone. I could put a quarter in and I could call and ask for a ride. We don't have those anymore. Huh?
You always called
Quarter.
It was a
Used to be
dime.
a dime.
Meet me at 8 o'clock in the car. You have a collect call for meet me at 8 o'clock in the car. But I'm just saying, I think there's that discussion needs to happen as well, because if you're not allowing it in the school, And then if, you know what I mean, I think they can use it appropriately at certain times. And I think letting them know that these are the times you can use it might be helpful for them in their future. Eric's good.
Mr. Bellis, thanks for bringing all this up. I think something we should look into as we move forward in this process is there are a lot of professionals that have done a lot of research and a lot of work on the impact to the mental health of these children based on the cell phone usage, social media usage, all of this stuff that Mr. Bellis brought up. I think we would be wise to look into potentially having a guest speaker come in, speak to the kids in the schools, and lay this data out in front of them and actually show them this is how it's impacting you negatively. Lay it out to the students, to the staff, and even have potential after-hours presentations where the parents can come in and actually see these presentations and see how this is negatively impacting their children with this constant barrage of social media and messaging apps and everything else. I truly believe that if people saw it and it was right there in their face and they could actually be shown how it's negatively impacting them, they would take steps to limit the access.
Thank you, I think we need to.
Any other discussion? Okay. Any other?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Mrs. Wigan?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Motion passed, we're adjourned.